Hey, everyone, this is Andy Hall, and you're watching Best Advice Ever. Now, some of you may notice that Robert Stanley, my guest, is not here right now, and I'm going to tell you why. Because he's not here, but I know that he is going to be here, and so I'm going to be entertaining for a few minutes until he does arrive. Robert Stanley, I'm going to give Robert Stanley probably the best intro I can because he's not here. Robert Stanley is the host to the Right to Reason podcast. It is an interesting podcast and one well worth your time. I was just listening to two podcasts ago. He had Steve Hill, Satanist Steve Hill from California. Who's a stand-up comedian, really funny guy. He's been on this channel a couple of times. And he also had on the same show a former Nazi, his words, he called himself a former Nazi, white supremacist, Jay Ashram, I believe. Ashram, that's his name, I believe. I listened to about 3/4 of the conversation on that particular episode. Well worth your time. Like I said, they talk about race. They talk about events going on in the country. And it's like I said, it's well worth your time. What else is going on with me? I'm glad you asked. I'm going to be going on Satanists. I guess I'm just going to talk about Satan for a couple of minutes. I'm going to go on a live stream tomorrow night, New Year's Eve, with Jack Materko over at Satan TV, for all intents and purposes. If you don't know, the Satanic Temple runs a live stream. Well, it runs a streaming service kind of like Netflix, in a Netflix model, but they also do live streams. And so my buddy Jack, who used to run the Naked Diner podcast with me, he is going to be running like a 16-hour stream or a 12-hour stream tomorrow night, starting, I think it's something crazy like 7 a.m. till 11:45 at night. Of course, I am not going to be there for the entire stream because I can't do this for 16 hours straight and be even semi-coherent. Less coherent than what I usually am, so I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is pop in and out maybe. And what I just told Jack is that, look, tell me when Satan needs me, and I'll pop in. I'll try to be entertaining. I'll talk with other guests, and maybe, you'll be able to go to the bathroom or get something to eat while I'm doing my shtick. So that's what I think I'm doing on New Year's Eve. And of course, the Daily Atheist Morning Show is back on next Monday, the New Year, post-New Year, the first Monday of the New Year, doing the 9 a.m. in the morning till 10 a.m. in the morning, Easter time. We got a couple of guests coming on. I'm looking forward to it. I always have a good time with Chris Mallard on the morning Daily Atheist Morning Show. I'm just going to throw word salad up here. I'm just going to toss salad. That doesn't sound good either. I hope you're all doing well. I'm looking forward to this conversation about Robert Stanley, the host to Right to Reason. And this is just a miracle of live shows. I feel the need to click the go live button at 11 o'clock, maybe a minute later. I could have waited for a few more minutes, but maybe, like I said, I'm kind of irrational. And so this is what I do. Books, I have books. And you might notice that, let's pick out a few of the more interesting ones. I have a funny story about Jordan Peterson and the Necronomicon. It isn't really a funny story. It's just a story. I took a class with Jordan Peterson years ago, back in the mid-'90s, before Jordan Peterson became Jordan Peterson. And I was hanging out we were just talking in his office. And I don't know. We were talking about Carl Jung, and whenever you start talking about the psychologist Carl Jung, you start going into all these kind of weird, psychology of religion. And if you don't know anything about Carl Jung, he did a lot of work, a lot of analysis about alchemy, and I brought up the Necronomicon, and Peterson, in Grand Peterson style, just rattled off, well, you know, the Necronomicon is emblematic of a religion of this Kali figure, the great mother, the all-devouring image. And I'm going, oh, I was not aware of that. And, you know, when I was in my early 20s, that actually made sense to me, ladies and gentlemen. That made sense to me. And so I have a small section of my occult section, because those of you who know me know that I write horror stories every once in a while. I have a short story book on Amazon, cheap plug. And, you know, for source material, besides, of course, movies, I like to, I have a small horror library here, an occult section that I can read up on occult stuff, so I can get inspired for my writings. I'm actually writing on I'm editing a short story right now, and then I'm starting on what may be another book. I'm not sure. You know, these artistic projects have a life of their own. And so I'm editing a short story called Itch right now. I'm on my maybe third or fourth draft. And after that, I am right now, hey, Phil Lister, how you doing? This is me, Phil, talking to the camera, talking to you, and until Robert Stanley gets on the show. Robert, he was great. He messaged me last night saying that, hey, I have these ideas about what the best advice for me was, you know, for him. And I said, oh, that's great. So he's going to be on. He got held up. And so here I am talking. Talk away. I was just going through my occult section of my library here. And let's see what other. See, this is a mixture of my girlfriend's books and my books. So you can probably guess that the Stalin book up there is mine. The Age of Voltaire book, Hitler's Pope. And this is a book I reference every once in a while, The Cousins' Wars. Well worth your time. It compares the English Civil War, the American Revolution, and the American Civil War in terms of clans, in terms of similar groups fighting on pretty much isomorphically. They were basically the same groups fighting, of course, not the same people because they're hundreds of years apart, but the same groups in terms of, you know, bourgeoisie, in terms of the mercantile graph. Oh, hey, thanks a lot for putting it out to other or on Facebook groups. But once again, the Cousins' Wars, deep geek stuff about the English Civil War, the American Revolution, and the American Civil War. And I reference that every once in a while in my mad ramblings on the Daily Atheist morning show. I think that's the right combination of words. I'm not really sure. So I hope everyone has some kind of safe New Year's Eve plans. I plan to be staying home. Oh, you have the Cousins' Wars. Did you find that useful? I found that very useful and actually eye-opening. I read it years ago. And like I said, I still think about it. I still, you know, roll it around in my mind, especially when we're talking about Republicans and Democrats and the current culture wars. You know, we still have that divide between rural versus urban. Yeah, right. And what it does is that the Cousins' War gives me this historical perspective between the two groups that just keep on mashing together violently over the centuries. It's a remarkable read. I suggest it to everybody. This is a book. You can probably tell. This is a well-worn book here. It's The Russian Revolution by Richard Pipes. I took a graduate class in the Russian Revolution, of course. Once again, a lot of stuff I reference. And this is probably one of the most informative books I've read on the Russian Revolution. Like I said, I took it for a class. And look at this. I have an old card here that I have no idea, probably from like 20 or 30 years ago, in a section that talks about the social revolutionaries. There's also a really cool podcast if you're interested in the Russian Revolution. Oh, hey, man, Robert Stanley's here. I'm talking about the Russian Revolution, Robert Stanley, in my collection, because that's just what I talk about, I guess, when I just have a chance to talk into the void, sir. That's what I do.
How did that come up? I'm curious.
Well, I was just going over because usually I'm not here. This is my daughter's room. She is with her mom because it's COVID-19. It's the apocalypse. The rates are really high. And so I put a basic pause on her coming up here because under normal circumstances, my daughter is down with her mom for 1 week and then she's up here with me for another week. But right now, I thought it would be good to kind of put things, like I said, on pause. We're going to revisit the data, Robert, because you see, I try to be a data-driven person in between the fart jokes.
Right.
And so all my books just happen to be in this room. And my girlfriend thought, Andy, she kicked me out of the bedroom, basically. She said, Andy, if you have a chance of doing the show or any show down in this room with this wonderful backdrop of books, then get the hell out of the bedroom. Basically, that's what you told me. And I said, okay, so I guess I'm out of the bedroom.
They look beautiful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. There are a lot of these.
I want to go through them.
Yep, some of some are hers, some are mine. But pretty good quality overall. And I have to tell you, when you get to be older, right? When you get to be older, people like, well, at least I can speak for myself as an older person. There are, and especially after you've moved several times, because post my divorce, I moved. Phil, all right, I'm going to get to Phil Lister's comment in the section. But when you've moved as many times as I have post-divorce, you only keep the books you really want. There are a lot of books that just go by the wayside because you don't want to carry books.
Textbooks.
Oh, the textbooks from
textbooks.
The textbooks from 1993 that are hardcover and this big that you can now basically Google up the information.
I have a psychology book, textbook, that still lists homosexuals, gays, as mental illness. And I was showing my kids that the other day, and they were just like, "What? How did they? How did they get away with saying that?" I'm like, "That's what they thought back then, And think about what we call mental illness now. Maybe that's something that'll change, It was just a cool little moment with the kids to kind of blow their mind.
It's good that you took that opportunity to show them that because it kind of opens up their cognitive world a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it lets them know that just because it's academia, it doesn't mean it's necessarily accurate. And there's a lot of that going around with conservatives and the right, anti-academia stuff. But even when we're liberal, I think it's important that we don't we don't just keep like this wall between us and conservative thinking where we say that everything they say is wrong and everything we say is right, because there's a lot of stuff we miss out. Excuse me. There's a lot we miss out on. Like you don't hear a lot from liberals about just good stuff to teach your kids. You know what I mean? You don't hear a lot about like how many liberal talking heads can you click on their YouTube video and they'll talk about, here's how to help your marriage. Here's how to be a good husband today. And I know that stuff's really corny, but it's important. It's part of our life.
I agree with you. And you know what it is? I rage against the YouTube algorithm. I've had marginal success on my blog just because I've been able to not outsmart, because I'm not that guy. I'm not that intelligent. But I've been able to out-trick the Google algorithm and the social media algorithm on my blog. And on YouTube, it's like I'm going to do what I want when I want. I'm going to talk to who I want about whatever topics I want. And I know that hurts. That hurts the channel because people want to be, the algorithm wants to put you in a niche. They want to put you in a little box. Oh, my fictitious God, I think we might be pivoting to some advice. But before that, I just want to say, Phil Lister, your grandfather fought with the Finns as they broke free of Russia. Those were nasty wars. The Winter War, nasty conflict there. Um, yeah, I'm sure your grandfather had a lot of stories about that too. Robert
That's
Stanley.
crazy.
For people who don't know you and don't know your show, I already did an intro when you weren't here, but I think you probably know about you more than I do.
A little bit. It's mostly rumors.
Right. So for people who don't know you and your show, how would you introduce yourself in your show?
It's really a simple concept. It's just having guests on and discussing stuff like philosophy, psychology, politics, a lot of stuff on atheism, of course. That's where philosophy has to start. Once you can get past, it's like the what was that movie? God's Not Dead. Remember where the philosophy professor requires everybody to write it down? And even though that's ridiculous, that's not what college is like at all. Nobody would ever do that. They would lose their job. But I agree with Kevin Sorbo. It's a sentence I never thought I would say. But I agree with Kevin Sorbo that that is where you start for sure. So that's a topic we do a lot of, but everybody can find it at therighttoreason.com. That's where all the links are. And if you're on YouTube, you can just type that into your search bar and it'll pull up.
Right. And Robert, since we did that Atheist Drinking Out Loud show a month ago or so.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. And now I feel like I can refer to you as dude, since I probably believe I was when I was drunk during that show.
I'm a dude.
So dude, I was listening to a show with Steve Hill and the Nazi on it, and it was informative and entertaining at the same time.
Thanks. I'm glad you found some value in it. It was it was a weird one because I hadn't spoken to Steve in a couple of years, and I had been recommended the other gentleman by another guest. I never spoke to him either. So this guy comes on, and or before he comes on, I had told everybody in the previous episode and via social media that I was going to have a white supremacist and a black comedian, because I thought that'd be a fairly interesting pairing. But then the black comedian backed out, and it's because she was moving and busy and what have you. So I reached out to Steve, and he just happens to be a black comedian, which is, it's not like I know a lot of black comedians, it's just, and an atheist, I mean, think about that. Black comedian, atheist, that's three things that I was really fortunate that Steve joined us and helped out, but I did not know that he had so much background dealing with white supremacists. So it was just a cool group of guys to get to listen to.
I had Steve on my show, my old show, the Naked Diner podcast, and then recently on this channel, maybe a couple of months ago. And Steve's hilarious. He was a prison guard. He's a brilliant guy who's done like a million things with his life. And if anyone wants to listen to Steve talk to a former white supremacist, funny is that they're both Satanists now. They're both part of the temple.
I had no idea. It is not my networking ability that pulled that off. It was all just due to two guys having that in common and being really cool and talking about it. I actually was just talking to Steve last night. He and David Silverman are interested in doing a debate on racism, but what's the new term? Modern race theory is the concept, and so they're wanting to talk about that. And
well, that would be, I think that'll be a very entertaining show, and I could see how the moderator, which would be you, would have to think about ways of time management. I think is the best way of putting it, because both of those guys love to talk.
Yes, I don't know how I'm going to do that, so maybe I'll have a bell or something.
Right.
Literally mute them. But looking forward to that. We'll try to set up some time frame on that and see where we go from there. I've had a lot of people reach out and say, having Silverman on your podcast after some things in the past is a really wrong thing to do, and I don't think it is. Honestly, I don't think it is. I think it would be weird to have someone on the show right after they were accused of something and then talk to them and not bring up that topic.
Yeah.
I think that would be bizarre. It'd be awkward. But to have, it's a debate show. So having him on there debating a topic with another person, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But anyway, but just literally talking right out of my head as the thoughts come in. But I
understand.
It's on my mind. It's on my mind lately, I guess. Why?
Well, I would be interesting to see that exchange. Both
sharp guys. Real sharp guys, both of them. So I'll look forward to that.
So, dude, this is a good time, a good place, as good a place as any, to start pivoting about the best advice you ever heard.
Yeah, I should have segued that. Real great guys, despite their vices, but we all want to add some vices. Speaking of advice, I don't know, something smooth. I don't know.
Right.
Best advice I ever got. Probably my dad, and the advice isn't so much as awesome. Just in the phrasing of it, it was just simply think outside the box. And that was something that he always recommended that I do. And like I said, it's not that term itself is really important, or that phrase, but the way that he would go about doing it. He was an evangelical minister, and it was bizarre because he would encourage me to think about things that might not be what you would typically between the 4 and 14 stage want your child to think about if you're in the ministry, Sure. So he would ask me to compare writings, someone from Shakespeare with someone from the Bible and compare the two messages. And then I would come back and say, the Shakespeare one sounds way better, Dad. I got to be honest with you. He'd be like, what? No, what are you talking about? The Bible's much better than that. Here, I'll show you. And, he was always biased, because he did believe that, but he believed it was so real, that it was so accurate, that it was so valuable that whatever questions or skepticism that I might have, it would hit that wall of truth of the Word of God. So he was surprised when I became an atheist. He's like, what is going on here? And I'm like, you told me to, So there was this one time I remember in particular, real cool move on his part, I thought. But I was at this Christian school. It was called Gilead Christian Academy, and Macon, Georgia. And yeah, we were the what was it? It wasn't Gladiators. I can't remember the name of our mascot now. But anyway, doesn't matter. Who cares? So I'm sitting there in church, and I had just gone past this group of people, advertising their religion, and they were called the Nuwabians. And I had never heard of it. I haven't heard of them since. But they had this little church nearby, and it was like this anti-white group. It was just a bunch of black people, and that were like, it was kind of like Christianity, but they had like a new prophet or something like that. And this guy was telling them only black people are going to heaven, and that we don't have enough melanin in our skin and what have you. White people don't. And so I'm reading their pamphlet while I'm sitting in chapel one day, and it's about junior, sophomore in high school, I guess, and just looking through it and just finding it absolutely hilarious. And the principal comes walking through. We used to call him the Rat Richardson. His name was Mr. Richardson, of course, but he really just had like this mustache that, his face looked like a mouse, like a rat. It's so bizarre. And he had like these little teeth, like everything was pointed together in the front. But anyway, so he comes walking by and says, "Hey, what are you looking at?" And I show him, and he was really mad. He's like, this is religious propaganda from a different religion. He didn't bother looking at it, like actually reading it, because then he would probably laugh like I was doing. But he was really upset that I had some other religious content in church, and called my dad up, and he's like, "Boy, when your dad gets here, he's going to let you have it." And, because he knew he was a preacher, so he assumed that he was just as, what would you call that?
Adamant. Or
yeah. Yeah, closed-minded too. Like everybody was really closed-minded at that school, but that was never how my dad was. My dad was he just believed what he believed. But anyway, he showed up and said, "So what? What'd you call me here for? What did my son do?" And he goes, "Look at this. He was reading this in chapel." And he's like, "Well, why would that be a problem? Like why wouldn't you want them to look at other things? Why wouldn't you want them to explore other religions? If we have the right one, then it should be able to stand up to whatever else we're talking about. I mean, we're both Christians here, so let's let them look at other, and I thought that was so cool. Like, it was such a cool moment seeing these two people arguing about this. And I thought, if I'm going to be a Christian, I'm not going to be the rat kind, that guy, he's oblivious. He would have no chance of knowing if he was right or not. He doesn't even have faith. He just has, sincerity or whatever, like you call it. He's just strict about it. The other guy's got faith, albeit in something silly, I think, but
Oh, yeah.
Either way, I just thought that was great advice. That kind of idea is what led me to be a skeptical person, and eventually led me to, unknowing to my dad at the time, that was what led me to become an atheist. But I try to pass that on to my kids.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people who say, "I'm going to think outside the box," live inside the box so much they don't understand that they're in the box. How do you communicate to them, or is there a method about how to expand their boundaries, their ways of thinking?
I would think that story with the Rat Richardson and my dad is a good example where you could say, are you actually challenging the thing that you think? Are you looking at other sources, other materials that conflict with what you're thinking? And as long as you're doing that, at least you're being honest. You might not be right still, but at least you're being intellectually honest about it.
Yeah.
That's all we can do.
Yeah, I've done some work with Extinction Rebellion, the environmental group, and they recommend for people just to tell their stories. And that is powerful, and people, it resonates. So just telling that story, I think, helps expand what people the boundaries that their own box.
Right. Getting your story out there is in some way, maybe it's not just telling it. Maybe it's listening to the others. Is that kind of the idea that everybody's telling their story together? So you're hearing different stories. Is that part of it?
Yeah. That makes sense. Because when people tell you their stories, you get to figure out how they think too. And that's what I always find interesting, right? As a psychology major from years ago, is just how do different minds work? How do they think? How do they think better than me? How do they analyze data? I just find that kind of stuff fascinating.
I wonder if like the concepts that we have about what red is, like, is your red my red, that thing,
right?
Like I wonder if that applies to other stuff as well. I remember I had to take some psychology for my degree, but just the basic stuff.
Yeah.
But is that something that comes up a lot within, what would that be? Perception or?
Yeah. There's definitely. I had a sensation perception course years ago, and and there are many different laws and rules and logarithms actually that affect rules about how people perceive the world in terms of their own motivation. So if you're much more motivated, then you are more likely to perceive something out here in the world than if you're just kind of not engaged. I know that sounds redundant, but there's some real world.
No, it doesn't. I wonder, like, because we know truth isn't the same for everyone. When someone says that's a truth, that it's not just that they're a liar and that their truth is a lie. It's also that lots of times these people think they're telling the truth because they keep saying it to themselves over and over. And then the other side of it is, I was having a conversation, a lot of family coming up. It's around the holidays. I guess family's on the mind. But I was talking to my sister recently, and she's one of these conspiracy theory people. and she's talking
really?
about, oh man, she believes all the Trump stuff. It's really funny. All
Wow.
the
All of it,
and
the stuff that doesn't,
everything.
stuff.
Yeah, and she has no. Here's the problem with these guys. They have no idea that they are QAnon, and that's what's really dangerous about this particular conspiracy theory, is they don't even know what it is. At least if you talk to a flat earther, the flat earther will say, "I am a flat earther," and you kind of laugh a little bit, and then you have the conversation, right? And
Yeah.
but a lot of these Trump people, that the whole election was a lie. Trump's about to release the Kraken soon, and all that stuff. A lot of that, they have no idea that they're part of a conspiracy theory called QAnon. They just think this is true. I looked it up on YouTube. I know it, and she was telling me about this, and I'm trying to be polite and whatnot, because when it's politics, it's so easy to offend. So I'm like, how do you know that's right? How do you know this thing's right? Did you look into that at all? And do you have any sources to back that up? All the little cliche things you always ask. And it was obvious that she was an honest person. She just felt that truth was a little bit different than whenever I think of truth.
Right.
Like there's less criteria that you have to meet for it to become truth in her mind. So it really is, you call it naive, but it's also kind of like this beautiful world that some people live in. That's just everything is a possibility. It's like if you were to cartoonize our world almost, and there's just dragons and lollipops and stuff floating in the sky. It's kind of nice. It's just it's not truth.
It's no. Indeed. So when we initially talked, you sent me a message, and I mentioned this earlier before you came on, that you had 3 pieces of advice. You want to get to the second one?
Oh, sure. Yeah. The other 2 were just things that I got just kind of on from my own life, like that. The first one, my dad saying think outside the box is kind of something that was thrown on me, but the other one was there was a guy at this place I was working at. It was this chrome place, and they would chrome the hydraulic cylinder that would go on a forklift,
Sure.
or cranes, or other hydraulic cylinder machines. And I was asking him about how he did his job, and that was something that I learned from just some old man that had been making the same thing. He'll make 40 of them a day every day for his entire life, and that was what he had told me, was that there was a difference between talent and skill. That talent is kind of just luck. It's something that's thrown on you. Skill comes from work ethic. Skill comes from doing the same thing over and over and having the discipline to keep doing it. And I thought that was really cool, because I am not a talented dude. Like I don't have a musical ability in my body. I don't have not great at sports or what have you. I was pretty good in football back in the day, but I was never like the guy that everybody's cheering when he runs on the field. I was always just part of the team kind of guy. I didn't have a whole lot of natural talent. So that was something that stuck with me through my life, is if I wanted to be good at something, I knew I could be. I have what it takes, because all it really requires is having a strong work ethic and staying with it. And that's, at 37, I haven't had a lot of success in my life, but the areas that I have had success that I feel proud of, it's from that. It's from that bit of advice of saying, just keep doing it until you get it perfect. And then the other one was something I just came across in Nietzsche. It was from The Twilight of the Idols. Yeah. And he who has a why can bear almost any how. You've probably heard that one before. And
yes,
it's a famous line. And I don't have a story on that one. It's just something that I've always really just valued, just because it.
Well,
I tried. Yeah, go ahead.
This is what I tell my kids, is that if you have purpose and meaning in your life, then it's like insurance policy. It is part of the recipe of being psychologically resilient. That's what it is, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. Yeah.
Yeah. When I saw you put that quote down, it's like, yeah. I cannot agree with you and me and Mr. Nietzsche more about the
So that would be what I try to pass on to my kids is, it's not just what you're doing, but here's the reason that you need to do it. And sometimes the reason is the room's messy, it's got to get cleaned up, whatever. It's pretty basic stuff, but as long as you know the why behind it, you have some reason to continue and working at it, I think. So.
Totally. And I was thinking about the other quote before that you were talking about in terms of success and in terms of the difference between talent and skill. I think it's very human for people to look at people who are very successful and just say, oh, it must be an inborn talent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so not the case.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's certainly fair to look at someone that has a lot and assume that they probably had different privileges than someone that doesn't have a lot. But that doesn't mean that it was just talent, and it doesn't mean that you can't work at it to earn it. Or you could always take it. That's the option too. That's where we're approaching here pretty soon with the wage gap disparity that we're seeing, and we're gonna start busting out the what's the thing that chopped the head off with?
The guillotines. The guillotine, yeah. Right?
It's coming soon.
Well, anyway. You raise an interesting point. Pivoting towards that topic, it is there has to be a remedy one way or the other, right? There has to be some kind of solution, and I've thought that it's either we're going to be going towards being more like Norway, or maybe using your metaphor, the French Revolution with the guillotine. It's one of those two methods, one of those two paths.
Yeah, something's got to change eventually. Our left isn't really left. I mean, we can't even get Medicare for all passed through the House right now. Yeah. It's crazy, and we've got what 10, 12 progressives right now, and we can't even get them to push
I hope on that. Yeah, I hope that a few things happen. One is that DC and Puerto Rico get statehood. That would change the balance of power in the Senate. I hope that gerrymandering, there are states right now trying to handle gerrymandering so that these representatives don't have safe districts. And when you have a safe district, you can be safe to be radical. You can do whatever you say, whatever kind of crazy crap you want to. And that's a real big problem. And that creates this kind of logjam in the House of Representatives. Statehood for DC, and the end of gerrymandering, and then primarying these out of touch Democrats, these corporate Democrats with progressives. I think, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that could be a way out of the crisis that we're in.
Yeah. How do you fix the presidential elections though? Because that one, even the gerrymandering doesn't really impact that, but yeah, I don't have a solution to that whole electoral college thing, because you look at the map one way and you're like, well, this is just land voting for someone. Yeah. So the guy that lives in North Dakota has 8 more votes than I do, more or less, and that's not right. Fair. If I live in California or what have you. So
at the very least, at least in my humble opinion, you have Maine and Nebraska, right? They divide up their electoral votes proportionately. So it isn't an all or nothing game for them. And they seem to do pretty well. They seem to do pretty well. So even if you're not in favor of getting rid of the electoral college, then at the very least, can't we just divide up proportionally because then you would have a much more of a free market, I think, because people would be fighting not just over these 5 or 6 states, these battleground states, but you would actually have to politicians would have to go to many different areas to try to get support.
So it can be done.
It can be done. It's a question of will. That's what it is. It's a question of will and changing hearts and minds. But what do I know? I'm just a guy with a YouTube channel, dude. That's all I am. And
well, I enjoy your YouTube channel, and I'm really happy that you let me come on. I'm sorry I was running a little bit late today.
I've been looking forward to talking with you, especially after you gave me those pieces of advice beforehand. And I'm glad that you did. A lot of the time people come in and it's exciting.
You don't know what they're going to say.
Because I don't know what they're going to say. Sometimes they don't know what they're going to say. And a lot of the times it's magic. I think this was a bit of magic too. Yeah, dude. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, I'm all over social media if you're looking that direction, but on YouTube, on all the podcast outlets that people use. But if there's just one single hub that I would recommend, it'd be the righttoreason.com. I
think I have that in the description of yes, I do have that in the description of the video of this video, so people can go click on that and head over to the hub about all things Robert Stanley, or at least all things public about Robert Stanley, I guess. And
I keep a little private, so
I keep it private, dude. So once again, thanks. Do you have anything that's dropping? Do you have any a podcast episode that's in the works, or you're editing, or you're dropping?
The latest one that came out it was just a lot of fun to do, because I see in movies where they'll change the timing on something lots of times. Well, before that happened, or Tarantino style and what have you. And I never heard it done like on a podcast. So I had Javier, Jason Hannerfeld. He's a musician. Javier's got his own podcast. Brent Lee, he also has a podcast called Unapologetics. And I had them on, and we were all going to make fun of Javier. Brent Lee had some clips that he was going to share from Javier's podcast, and we were just going to make fun of him. But it was like a prank, because me and the other guys were actually going to make fun of Brent. And the whole thing was like turn it around on him, like, oh, well, I didn't think your clip was funny, but here's a funny clip. And then we play one from his, and we all, But we ended up getting into a big argument about Black Lives Matter. And, people are literally yelling over one another, because I just put together a bunch of atheists that we were going to make fun of our podcast. I didn't really do, try to align politics at all. And it got into a big fight. And so whenever it was over, one of the guys recommended, well, why don't you release the fight and then do the funny part after that? And I thought, well, how do you do that in a podcast? So I tried to change the time so it actually starts with the middle and then goes to the beginning and then goes to the end. So I like editing stuff. So that was a lot of fun for me just to try it out. But I think it turned out well, and it's a little confusing. It's a little complicated. But anyway.
So how do you moderate something like that when you get yourself into a conflict or the guests get themselves into a conflict that you didn't see coming? What do you do?
Well, you join the fight and then just become one of the people talking. But toward the end, giving away all my secrets here. But toward the end, you want to find a wrap up at least, so that it seems like this had some meaning. So I just kept saying over and over, wow, it sounds like we got a lot of common ground out there. Everybody's kind of slowly starts to get on board, and I'm like, well, you're saying you don't like Obama, and you're saying you do, but you both know about Obama. Seems like you guys have a lot in common. Am I right? He was both your president for 8 years, right? So, hey.
That's fantastic.
You just keep doing it over and over until everybody kind of gets on the same page, and then it's kind of neat, because I don't know if they're doing it on purpose, or if it's something that you just start doing, because once you hear something enough and you kind of get the theme from one person trying to get everybody to get along, everybody just goes that direction. But but that actually happens a lot. A lot of episodes where people there's some kind of conflict or a debate, and it ends with, I guess as long as we keep talking to each other, in the end, blah 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 or whatever, keep listening to. And I think people would think like it's planned or set up, but it's actually not. It is part of the moderating, and it's probably a lot more to do with just having people that are good at having conversations. Than it is with me moderating, but
a lot of the times it's difficult not to get an argument going when you get like 2 or 3 skeptics together. It just happens. Yeah. Very.
We're just so bitter.
When we don't have Christians or theists to argue with, well, there's always people within my own club I can talk to. Yeah,
right next to me. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
So Dr. Octopus in the chat says they sub to your YouTube channel, sir.
Oh, thanks, Doc Ock.
So here we are.
Dr. Octopus. What was it? It was Dr.
Osiris. Dr. Osiris. So there we go. I guess we're going to close things up here. Everyone in the chat, thanks for showing up. This has been a lot of fun. I learned things. Robert Stanley. Dr. Octopus, I will add you as a mod, in fact, sir. I'm sorry, doing some housekeeping here, and you're now moderator. Once again, everyone in the chat, thanks a lot. Robert Stanley, a slice of magic, sir. That's what this was. I wish you a safe New Year's.
You too.
And everyone else too. Yeah, all right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Annie.